Ooh, that looks tasty. Welcome folks, Today the Hungry Gamer is back with another mini preview, and today we're talking about fighting fantasy adventures from Steve Jackson and Ian Livingstone, but this particular version is designed by Martin Wallace. Now, before I get started, you're going to see up in the corner in just a minute a playthrough, or at least part of a playthrough that I did. And you can check out that link in the description to kind of see not a full game, but a good chunk of the game that kind of gives you an idea of what's going on. And there are minor spoilers if you're looking at the details up there, so just do keep that in mind. Now, what this game is it is a reworking of the Fighting Fantasy books. Now, I never played those. I know very little about them, but I know a lot of people love them. So that is what this is taking on. You're playing through this adventure. Now, this particular version comes with stories in the form of decks of cards. And as you go through, you're placing down cards that are going to tell you what's in the dungeon room you're in and what the options of places you can go are. And sometimes it'll give you hints. It'll say, oh, you hear clicking from this direction. So if you go there, you might have an idea of what's going on. And as you're placing the cards out, there'll be art on there. There might be bad guys on there that has their stats. And then when you're finished, you flip the card over and it has adjusted the scene based on what has happened. Maybe you killed it, maybe a trap was set off, whatever, and then that's what you're able to see. And mechanically, the game is pretty simple. It comes down to you're going to be moving into a new room, picking the order for your 4 heroes. You always have to play all 4 heroes, and they're just 4 basic classes. You have a warrior, a scout, a mage, and a healer, and you have all 4 of them. You send them into the room, and you put out the next card for the dungeon. You put your party marker in there, and you look at the encounter card, and it'll tell you what happens. And many times, based on who entered the room first, you might get a bonus or a minus. So it might say, if the healer was the first one to enter the room in this case, then this thing happens. And that's something that kind of carries on through the game. Often you'll have a chance to interact with things, and depending on who interacts with it, you may get something good or bad. But in all instances, every dungeon room comes with its own encounter card, which tells you what you find in the room, what's going on, and then what the condition is for you to flip the card over. Combat is relatively simple as well. As you go into a room, you might see on the card various creatures that are there and that has their stats. And stats are basically their skill value, which is like their attack ability, and their health. And you're going to, when you fight, roll 2d6. They're going to roll 2d6, and you add your attack values, and the difference between the two is the damage that one of you takes. So if I am the warrior and I wind up with a total of 10, and the monster ends up with a total of 12, I will take 2 damage. If I wound up with 15 and they ended up with 12, then they would take 3 damage. And that's how that works. Now there's a little bit of positioning strategic combat, because after the first round of combat, you're able to move your characters around and gang up on different monsters. And the more of you that are ganged up on a monster, the more bonuses you're going to get to your attack ability. And of course, they'll get the same thing too if there's a whole bunch of monsters as well. And you're going to play through the game until you have used pretty much the whole deck of cards, and either you have accomplished the end goal, beaten the big monster, solved the puzzle, or you have not. And there's also ways that you can kind of level up as you're going. You can get new abilities, and I did fail to mention each character has their own deck of basic abilities that they can use, and for the most part, those are 1 use per game. So, what do I like about this game? It's fun. It's so quick and simple, and it reminds me of when I used to play the Lone Wolf books, which maybe are like Fighting Fantasy, I don't know, but I love that series of Lone Wolf books, and it reminds me of that. It's you're moving through this dungeon, you're fighting, you're beating things, you're solving little puzzles. Very, very, very cool. It's quick, but it's not short, if that makes sense. Like, every choice you make is relatively quick. Every combat is relatively quick, but there is a lot going on. So it does feel, even just the tutorial mission, like you're doing a relatively epic dungeon, and it'll take you about 2 hours or so to do that. So it's not short, but everything you do is quick. I like that the characters are definitely very clearly differentiated, and it seems like as they level up more and more, as you get access to more of the different cards, that will increase, though I'm not sure. I only have a few level 2 cards, and whether there's going to be level 3 cards, I don't know, but it seems like that's something that's going to be there. It does a good job of dice mitigation because every single character has the ability to use their luck. They all have a luck stat, and it's somewhere between 7 and 9 luck or whatever that is. And you spend a luck, reroll all the dice. Spend a luck, reroll all the dice. And you can just do that until, of course, they're gone. So it's a little resource you have to manage. I think the combat is relatively satisfying. It's very simple to know who wins, who takes how much damage. So you can just roll all the dice at once. Or if you're playing with someone else, they can roll the bad guy dice, whatever. I think the ganging up is a very simple yet clever way to kind of illustrate that idea that more of you are fighting one monster. So the people who aren't the main fighters, they're getting kind of stabbed in the side, they're getting bonuses. I think that actually works really well and makes for some interesting tactical decisions as you wind up fighting harder and harder monsters. And you're hoping that your healer can survive that first round of combat so you can maybe put them all the way to the back of the line and kind of gang up on somebody to get a better chance of actually getting a strike in. And I think all of that works well. I think the way you have to choose when to spend your luck, because it's going to be gone, when you spend your abilities, because they're going to be gone, it's also a very interesting decision. And I like the way that as you go through, you're drawing these cards for each room. It tells you what's in the room. You flip it over and you find stuff. Sometimes you find treasure and it says, this is the character that can use this. Boom, you give it to them. They're going to use it. It's going to be a bonus. Sometimes you have to make that choice of, oh, who's going to drink this thing? I'm going to have the healer drink this. Ah, the healer drank this, that was bad. Or, ah, the healer drank this, they figured something out. I think all of that is very, very clever. So what are my quibbles with the game? First off, there's not really any story. So I likened it to Lone Wolf books, but the Lone Wolf books were a story. This is very, very, very little story. It's more of just go get the MacGuffin, and in the first tutorial scenario, there's a little bit of a puzzle you have to solve to get the MacGuffin. If you get all the pieces to the puzzle, you can try to solve it. But there's no story, right? It just says, go find this thing. Why? Because we need it. Great. So you don't get a lot of that in this. The second thing I'll say is, as I mentioned before, it's mechanically very, very light and very, very simple. So you're not playing Madara here. You're not playing Oathsworn here. None of those things. You're just simply going to roll 2 dice, add some numbers. That's it. Maybe use some abilities. And you've got 5, 6, 7 abilities, so you've used them, and they're gone. And that just might not be what you're looking for, right? This is not a deep game. This is very much beer and pretzels, throw it out, fight some stuff, and you're done, move on. And then the last thing that I'll say is, there's not really much replay value. I will play through it again, maybe once, but I know what happens in the rooms. I now know the answer to the final puzzle. I now know where to go, even I don't remember perfectly, but I know where to go to find the different things that I might need. And so that really does knock the replay value down. It's not to say you can't do it again and have fun and try different strategies and do different things, because there were certainly times that I made choices that wound up having something happen. And that's just something that you might be interested in doing, but probably you're just going to want to have a few of the different stories and decks you're going to play through those, and that might be the end of it. So depending on how much this game costs, that will determine if you think that's worth it or not. And the last thing I'll say is, in the prototype I have, it just has a little cylinder, black cylinder for the party marker. I wish it was better. I'm not saying it needs to be a mini, because that would up the price a lot, I'm sure. But even just a token with the art of the characters on it, because there's only 4 of them, you always have to use all 4, so let me see them. But that's it, folks. I was very, very, very pleasantly surprised by this. I initially said, yes, I wanted to cover this based on 2 things. One, Martin Wallace, who always does interesting things. I don't always like all of his games, but they're always interesting to me. And then 2, the IP. The fighting fantasy things, even though I never played it, I hear people talk about the good old days and how great fighting fantasy books were, so I absolutely jumped into it. But I also never played the fighting fantasy things, so I didn't know if it was going to be something that was going to resonate with me. And in this case, it did. I had a very good time playing through this game. It was a good challenge, and the first time through, I screwed it up. I totally screwed it up. I knew in my head I was probably making a mistake, but I was like, no, I think I got this. I didn't. And I lost. But I wasn't mad about it. That's fine. Move on and I'll play another. I don't have another one, but I would play another one. So there you have it, folks. That is Fighting Fantasy Adventures. As always, if you found this video useful, please like, subscribe, share, maybe become a channel member. As always, thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.